Hello and welcome to the second podcast. Today I'm delighted to be joined by Copeland MP Trudy Harrison, the Cumbria Police and Crime Commissioner Peter McCall, and the Chairman of the Britain's Energy Coast Business Cluster, Ivan Baldwin. Welcome to all three of you this morning.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
Trudy, it's a little more than 3 months since we both attended a social inclusion conference where we celebrated and highlighted the fantastic work being done by the NHS, by volunteer groups, by our fantastic third sector and dare I say local authorities. You know, that was at a time before this crisis had even started. And, you know, I think, you know, since that conference, you know, we've obviously gone into the pandemic and the lockdown, and those organisations have all just gone over and above even what we already thought of them in the first place.
Absolutely, and I'd like to start this podcast by firstly thanking you, Mike, for showing the initiative and making it possible, but also thanking the incredible response across our great county and in particular Copeland. Our community has demonstrated incredible spirit, and everybody from the NHS to emergency services, the community groups that have been set up, the people going the extra mile, the fantastic businesses that have adapted with agility and pace so quickly to help the most vulnerable has been really quite outstanding. There's no other word for it. It's absolutely outstanding. And as we progress, it's about understanding the new normal, really, because physical distancing will continue to play a huge part in how we live, how we learn, and how we work. So now those companies, particularly in the nuclear industry, are at the forefront of helping us all understand how to write the policies and procedures that will enable us to move forward. But it's just been incredible. And I also think it's really important that whilst we learn the lessons around PPE and distribution and testing, it's also important to take a moment to understand what has worked so well and what opportunities there are in the future. And the very fact that we're all here today, meeting by, you know, technology, we've become relative experts with some technical assistance across so many platforms, and being able to meet with our, you know, friends, colleagues, much more effectively, I would argue. I think there's definitely things that we should maintain going forwards.
Yeah, thanks, Trudy. Peter, just moving on to you. You know, the message from government and from the police, you know, is still we're still in lockdown. You know, we're still at a dangerous point in this crisis. You know, in terms of enforcing that lockdown, you know, there's been some concerns raised. The people are coming into our holiday hotspots. You know, I think particularly in the Lake District last week. And, you know, I've seen on social media, you know, a ridiculous call for people to come to Workington on Saturday to protest against the lockdown. You know, what measures are the police taking to enforce that we continue to drive home this message that we've still got to stay at home, protect the NHS and save people's lives?
Absolutely. And, you know, the police stance has not changed. The government, until such time as the government say that we can lift these lockdown measures, they remain in place, and the police will continue to enforce that. But I think the key message is for people that actually the police actually are in a really difficult position with this, in that it is emergency legislation, and nothing that you do in an emergency is ever going to be perfect. It's ridiculous to think that it would be. It's ridiculous to think that the legislation could cover every base. And so what it boils down to is every citizen doing their bit. And do you know what? With the legislation, it's dead easy to find loopholes and find excuses to get round things. But actually, that says more about our own mentality if that's what we're trying to do. Yeah. This is a joint effort, and it has been working. You know, the fact is that the numbers of hospital admissions and deaths is being suppressed, and we are getting into the right place. But the worst thing in the world now would be to start allowing that lockdown to dissolve, and we'd end up with another crisis. I served in the military. My last My last operational deployment was in Sierra Leone dealing with Ebola. And that's exactly what we saw dealing with Ebola, where people kept breaking the rules. And that went on for over a year. We don't want that happening here. So we're getting into a really good place, thanks to everything that as Trudy said, the NHS, third sector, councils, everyone's really played their part. And the last thing we need now is a few clowns, frankly, to start pulling away at the strings. So, the police will continue to engage and try and educate where that's necessary. But where it is, if people do break the rules, then enforcement is an option. And I frankly make no excuses about that, because at the end of the day, this is about saving lives. So many, 26,000 plus people have died. So yeah, it is, it's a real challenge for everyone being in lockdown. It's inconvenient for us all. But actually, for that relatively small sacrifice, we can get through this thing. And so the police will take action, and where people break the rules, then they will get engaged and they will enforce it.
I think that's encouraging to hear, Peter. So that the message from the police is quite unequivocal. If you're planning to visit the Lake District, don't. If you're planning to attend protests, don't. And follow the guidelines of stay at home, protect the NHS, save lives.
Absolutely.
Ivan, on a different subject, you've got a large membership in the business cluster of businesses of varying sizes. What's been the different impacts for those businesses and the immediate management issues that you've really had to look at?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, our members are sort of broad ranging from the largest companies right down to the very smallest, and they're all playing the part. So we kind of talked about then that different people, different organisations have all got to play the part. All of our businesses, they've got to follow the rules everybody else is following, whilst at the same time, there are many of them that are part of the sort of critical supply chain. So there are some businesses that are out there making sure that we can be fed at home, the lights can be on, whilst at the same time sort of respond to the enormity of the pandemic and the different challenges on them. So we're an organisation in the business cluster that's all about collaboration and relationships. So how can organisations work together for the wider benefit of the business community? And so one thing that we've done is had to shift everything that we did. We used to bring people together, 200, 250, 300 at our meetings was completely impossible. And for many business, that was an absolute lifeline, because there's a lot of human relationships in all of this behind those businesses, especially the smaller businesses, the SMEs, the really small businesses. Those relationships help them trade. So we've had to bring them online, like we're doing now, Mike. And also what we had to do is look at how it's affecting them all differently. So some have had to put the staff into furlough schemes. Some of them are business owners that are like limited companies, and some of the challenges that they face. But the main thing that we're trying to do through all of that in this very near term is keep the doors open. How can we keep those conversations going? How can we help people that are the most challenged? I was doing it just this morning. We do a ring around of our smallest companies, just talk to people. How are you doing? How are you getting on? How can we help you? And then try to put them in touch with people in the membership that have got the skills and the capabilities, be they lawyers, be they accountants and so on, maybe just to help them out. And I think now more than ever, and Trudy said it before, the community spirit and the agility, I think, has been really important. And one of my big hopes moving forward is we've kind of recognised even more so now just how important community is. Maybe, at one time we're kind of a bit more selfish Although you don't really see that in this part of the world, I think it's one of the beauties of this part of the world. But moving forward, community spirit is so important for us in business and everybody else, I would say.
I couldn't agree more. Trudy, clearly I think it's fair to say across Cumbria that in addressing the pandemic and the measures that's been taken, the people have adhered pretty much to what they've been requested to do, which has been great to see. And I think all the various participants have done a pretty good job in trying to support the community throughout the crisis. But we've got to, while we continue and maintain the current situation of addressing and keeping people safe, we've got to have one eye on the future and how we emerge out of this crisis. What are you seeing now as the next steps, and what do you see as your role in that as a political leader in the borough, and my role as a leading the local authority working in conjunction with you?
Yeah, this is about communication. That's essentially what an MP is. So most of my week is taken up with calls with health people, with emergency services and councils, and I thank my lucky stars, Mike, that I live and am bringing up my family in Copeland, because your council is head and shoulders above many others. I speak to lots of other MPs in my role as a PPS to the Prime Minister. That's part of the job, to reach out to other MPs. And Copeland Borough Council and the way in which you have responded is really, really exemplary. And as we move forward, government, it's all about the R factor. We hear a lot about the reinfection, the reproductive rate of the virus. And what we want to ensure is that we don't overwhelm the NHS. And that has been successful. The tragedy of losing nearly 27,000 people is absolutely awful. And all of our thoughts are with their families. But the NHS was not overwhelmed. Our ICU was not overwhelmed. And that's because of the measures that were taken. So that's number one. We need to ensure that that continues and that the death rate declines and that the R value does not increase. And there was a really good video yesterday during the Prime Minister's press conference, which just explained in really simple terms, how the R factor kind of works. We know that in Cumbria we are below 1. Certainly in hospitals. Care homes is a different concern, actually, and that's really quite worrying. And it's about having the PPE, because as we move forward and we're going to maybe be asking people to use public transport, we need to be sure that we've got the correct PPE that isn't going to jeopardise and detract from the front line to be able to protect people if they can't maintain that minimum 2 meters distance. So it is all about the science, it's about the medical aspect, and we'll be led by that. So we're not really in a position at this stage to be dictating any kind of timetable. We're gathering more and more data, testing's ramping up. So with that increased knowledge that we've got about where the instances are of the virus being transmitted, how different people are coping, how the symptoms are able to be treated, how our NHS is coping, how social care is coping. And I want to pay tribute to care workers, because they are going the extra mile when they're having to get used to changes daily and enabling the residents who have really missed contact with their loved ones, friends and family. They're using technology just like we are. It's brilliant what's happening in our care sector, I think, right now. So it's all about the science, and then we develop a better understanding of that timetable.
But it's you probably understand that some of the government schemes, the furlough scheme, the various other schemes that have been set up have been a lifeline to a lot of people. But as always, there is some that fall through the cracks, and you're not particularly mindful of some of the small self-employed people with no premises who need to get back to work quickly. What hope can you offer out to them that there's going to be a road back to work and to earning money again?
Okay, well, firstly, what I'd say, Mike, is there has been some misunderstanding about who should be going to work and what businesses should be staying open or essential. That's been a term that's been quite misleading. So I can categorically say that if your business is not on the Ministry of Homes, Communities and Local Government's list of businesses which need to close, then you should continue to trade if you can do so within the Public Health England guidelines. And if you can follow the social distancing, then you should be going to work if you can't work from home. And that is always the priority, to work from home if you can. The key worker is really about childcare availability. So clearing up that misunderstanding has taken a lot of effort, certainly from my office. There have been people that have not been able to take advantage of the financial packages that have become available. Some of that has changed because, as Peter said, this was emergency legislation. It was a bit rough in areas, and it's adapted, and it will continue to adapt. For example, people that were unable to join the furlough scheme if they didn't work for the company after the 28th of February, that was extended through to mid-March, and that's helped many thousands of people. I'm very concerned about small bed and breakfast owners because they weren't paying the business rates, so therefore they can't get the business rate relief scheme, and we have to make sure that our travel industry can recover quickly. But of course, the very nature of socialising means that they will probably be one of the last businesses really that's safe to reopen.
Absolutely. Peter, the one thing that's coming out of this crisis is people are having to adapt and operate differently. Even on platforms like this, we're as an organisation ourselves, we're moving to virtual meetings where everyone will join the meeting through a digital platform. While your priority at the moment is enforcing the lockdown, where next for the police, and how do they emerge out of this crisis?
Well, I think in terms of the future, and I think I would endorse everything Trudy said about the future in terms of continuing to battle the corona thing, and that will go on, who knows for how long. But I do think it is right that we should have an eye into the future for all organisations. Because actually, I try to be a half full sort of bloke, and whilst there's nothing good about coronavirus, actually it has made all organisations stop and think about the way that we operate. And for the last few years, of course, environmental issues have been really pressing, and people have been waking up to that and thinking, gosh, we must change. And we do lots. There's always a danger. We scratch our heads, we talk a lot, but don't actually do anything. And this crisis, if you like, presents us with an opportunity where actually we have to change things. We have no alternative. And certainly, I've been talking this week with the Chief Constable in terms of us already now looking at lessons learned for the way that we're operating. For example, we've spent just over 400k in the last month improving the IT that individual police officers are carrying around with them, so that they don't have to be coming into stations and they can socially isolate, but more importantly, that they can be out in the community, being seen, doing. And that's why I've had people from all over the county saying to me, I've never seen so many cops. Actually, it's the same number of cops, we just happen to have them being pushed out more into the community, and that's definitely something that we want to continue, and we're looking at how we might do that into the future. But I think that applies to the way that all organisations across the county work. We have seen, for example, and Mike, you're very well aware of this because you started one of the initiatives where council leaders and we get together using this kind of means once a week to start talking about the things that actually government can't do. Government can't do everything. And so some of the issues that we were just talking about there, the people who inevitably fall between the cracks of big government policy need to be picked up somewhere. And actually, that's where locally, we do have a responsibility, and we can best execute that by working much more closely together. And I think, perversely, whilst we're not meeting face to face, This sort of thing makes it more possible that we can talk regularly. I mean, I speak as one thing I have to say I'm not missing as the Police and Crime Commissioner for Cumbria is having to get, because I have to cover the whole of the county from Barrow to Longtown and all parts, and I have to admit I'm not missing having to make some of those long trips late at night, and so perversely, as I say, I think there are better ways of communicating. Picking up again on a word that Trudy used. It is all about communication if we're all going to work better together. And I do think we have to work better together. Local government, it's got to improve. And that's not a criticism of anyone or any one organisation. But we know that, this crisis is going to be to pay for in financial terms. Every organisation is creaking as a result, and who knows what the bill is going to be in the end. And quite rightly, I think the government are just, effectively throwing money at it in order to keep people in employment and try and keep our economy alive. And I think this might be the moment when actually we say, well, is the way that we govern ourselves locally the most joined up way, the most economic way? And we know that councils are all struggling financially, and that's going to continue. And so maybe this crisis, if there is anything good to come out of it, it is forcing us to take stock of how we operate. And we need to make sure that we learn the lessons, not just observe them. Again, in my military experience, after every operation, we would say, right, we'd have a big team who would look at lessons learned. And the joke always was, it was lessons observed. We observed the lessons, we noted them, and then repeated them next time we went away somewhere. We've got to actually do something about it. And, this is an opportunity. And folk keep saying, oh, what are you doing in the lockdown? How many box sets have you watched? And all this sort of, I wish I had time to watch flipping box sets or read. This is a moment when actually we should be, those of us in positions where it's our responsibility to do this. This is the opportunity to actually start thinking about these things, and because whilst the immediate firefight is dealing with the crisis, and we have to continue to do everything we can for that, we've got to have an eye into the future, because our kids' generation are going to be paying for this, and I think we owe it to them to start working towards that and getting ourselves into a position to be able to do it.
Yeah, I agree, Peter. As an eternal optimist, Ivan, the recession in 2008 was, the banking financial recession, and historically, they take a lot longer to come out of. It's almost been 10 years in the recovery from there. This time, the recession that we'll inevitably go into this time, I think the recovery will be a lot sharper. And I think here in Cumbria, there's a lot of opportunity. I know we're critical. We're a critical part of the UK mission in terms of keeping the lights on. Your membership. What's your views for Cumbria coming out of the recession and the opportunities that will emerge from that?
Yeah, there's a lot of points that have been made that I couldn't agree with more. It's interesting how it doesn't matter which part of the sort of local fabric you're from, policing, crime, politics, or business. I think a lot of the messages are really, really common. One of the things for me in particular that I wanted to really sort of praise people for, and I touched on it earlier, is although we don't generate electricity in this part of the world from nuclear, we do a heck of a lot of work at the Sellafield site. So Sellafield National Nuclear Laboratory and the supply chain that actually supports the reactors around the UK. So that's half our clean energy in the UK, and that has been maintained through this, trying period. And it's a huge effort for people to be able to make that the case. And of course, we can't protect the NHS and stay at home if we can't switch the lights on. So I think, kind of when you look at that, I think it's a real demonstration of how Cumbria can really turn it on. It can really turn it on when it actually needs to. It can really come together and it can really make things happen. And that makes us, I think, a really investable proposition. There are conversations ongoing right now of big organisations that take a look at this area, look at the requirement for clean energy and net zero moving forward, and actually think that Cumbria could be a real proposition for that. And, whilst we are staying at home, whilst we are protecting the NHS, there are still things that we can do behind closed doors that allow us to have those conversations and engage with those type of investors. And picking up on Peter's point, I mean, I was probably one of the people contributing to the climate issue more than anybody. I was, on a train 5 times a week. I was on a plane. I was in my car all the time. And now I've had some real quality time to actually spend working and actually properly engaging with people. I mean, I find this, so much more beneficial in some ways than it would be rocking up 3 hours late 3 hours after traveling for a meeting, being really tired and not really contributing in the way that I would like. So I think moving forward, there are some potential huge opportunities that we can grasp, having proven actually we're a safe pair of hands. I think moving forward, one of the things that we're looking at really, and it's really important to us in the business cluster, is the idea of not leaving anybody behind. And when you look at how the future is going to unravel, nobody can really predict, but we know with some certainty that it's going to affect different people and different organisations in different ways. And I think one thing that we need to do as a community, and something that we're looking at in the business community, is how we actually don't make those mistakes where we inadvertently, without realising it, leave people behind. Some examples of that are, sadly, there are going to be redundancies, in this sort of short term. There are going to be young people coming out of education about to enter the workplace in one of the worst times possible. So we really need to focus on those young people. I've been quite fortunate, actually. The business cluster is really fortunate in that it seems to have a lot of good friends with great ideas. Paul Foster, ex-CEO of Sellafield, reached out to me a couple of weeks ago and said, I'm concerned about the local economy and, what can I do? And I want to do something to help. So, we got Paul, we got Tom Sampson, who's now the head of the Rolls-Royce UK SMR collaboration, ex-Cabinet Minister Hazel Blears, a group of other people, and a brains trust to start thinking about what can we do for our membership and small businesses. And you think there's some really immediate things, we kind of talked about it before. Peter made a point about government can't do everything, and it actually shouldn't. There's a lot of things that we can do for ourselves. There's a lot more that we can do with our Cumbrian pound. How can we trade with each other better? How can we find ways in tapping into that community spirit so that we can maximise the value of that pound? And that's one way I think that we can actually look at this whole idea of not leaving anybody behind. We'll have to change massively how we operate as an organisation, and many of our members do. So what can we do to move forward more into a digital type economy? And there are many ways in which you can actually do that, but it'll be harder for some than others. So one thing that we'll be looking to do is working with businesses to help them make that transition, so that we can still do our bit to support the social distancing measures, while still having an economy that can function and is sustainable and then can grow. The key thing, and I think it's been said many times on this sort of call, is collaboration, closer working across multi-agencies is really, really important. So Mike, picking up on Trudy's point earlier, thanks for setting this up, because these conversations are really important moving forward.
Yeah, Trudy, since 2017, 3 elections, the whole Brexit saga that we went through, now with the pandemic, this period of time, 2017, 2020, is going to form a real part of UK history. And what we do now is probably going to shape a lot of how the future is going to look for the whole country. Our particular interest is Copeland and Cumbria. I even talked, a little bit there about the SMR technology. I know both yourself, Ivan, and ourselves as a local authority are involved in trying to get those MSRs up here into Copeland. Is there anything you want to discuss on there?
Yeah, that'd be very helpful actually. And on the point on the kind of track record in 3 years, I had an author get in touch to ask if I'd be interested in doing a book on my short but busy period in Parliament, and that's really not my cup of tea at all. But I did have a quick reflection and think, yeah, it's been pretty busy. And now being in number 10 in amongst all of this, it's never a dull moment, but it's also really, really helpful. And I think Cumbria should and could absolutely shine here with our food producers. I want to see our farmers far more appreciated than they have been for the food that they're producing, and I want to see it for sale in Cumbria. I think the queues in supermarkets and some of our international supply chains have really highlighted the need to be self-sufficient. So support our farmers massively. And then I think on the industrial side of things, we're already used to working with PPE. We're used to a health physics kind of operation. We're used to social distancing because nobody wants to get too close to fissile material. So we will be able to adapt more quickly than other sectors. And we'll still have the priority of reducing the carbon footprint. We'll still have the huge need to bring clean energy to the world. And Ivan just mentioned Tom Sampson. It is absolutely fabulous that he is back in Cumbria working with the UK SMR consortium, Rolls-Royce. And we're speaking with EDF and others about how we can lead with advanced reactors, with small modular reactors and with large gigawatt reactors, but also the work that the National Nuclear Laboratory and others are doing around the kind of research and development. That's critical as well. And I think NNL is a fine example because whilst the vast majority of their staff are all working from home, they haven't had to furlough. They've been able to work with a small number of people actually on site. That's a fine example, and now they're helping other businesses, and Sellafield Limited are doing the same as well. We are so lucky to have such a collaborative business community, a brilliant council, emergency services who have really worked well with our councils and with our communities. And I repeat, we should thank our lucky stars that we live in Cumbria and particularly in Copeland. I am rather biased there. But moving forward, it's foot on the gas, guys, because it is the opportunity for Cumbria to shine as a centre of nuclear excellence.
Absolutely. Peter, there was due to be an election for you next month, which obviously has been cancelled. In your concluding comments, could you just bring us up to speed with what happens next in that respect?
Yeah, in fact, it was next week, next Friday, I think it was due to, or Thursday, it was due to be. Part of me is not sorry because I have to say, coming into this, the last thing I ever thought I was going to be was a politician, and I still kind of not sure I quite accept that title, but I guess if you're elected it makes you a politician. And the knocking on doors thing and posting leaflets so to be honest, I wasn't sorry to have that put back. But on the other hand, being serious, in this job, the one thing I have had to get used to is the fact that nothing works terribly quickly. And it's amazing how 4 years has flown by, and I think we've achieved a lot, but nowhere near achieved as much as I want to. But things like increasing the number of officers and getting into the communities, and I kind of feel actually because what's happened as a result of the emergency legislation, that election has been put back a year, so I will serve another year into May of next year, which is fine, and then there'll be another election next year for a 3-year period, so taking off the extra year, and I look forward to that, and at this stage I would say I will almost certainly stand again, because I really want to see through this change that we're talking about. And it's really focused, as we've been saying throughout this thing, on community. And for me, in terms of policing, that's, policing supports our whole infrastructure. If the county is a safe place to live with low crime, good quality people are going to want to come and live here. People growing confidence with the business on our high streets, and it just creates an environment that people want to be part of. And that's been an essential plank of our philosophy, certainly over the last 4 years, and together with the Chief Constable, who shares this vision. Policing has got to be a community thing, and that's why, starting with Copeland, actually, we started with the first community hub there, which has gone from strength to strength. We've now got those operating right across the county. The extra cops that we've invested in the last 3 years now, they're going back out into the community. And you'd have seen just before the corona crisis, we'd reopened police stations in Brampton, in Ambleside, and Keswick. We put cops back into Keswick, and I want to see that continuing, because that's where people want to see our police officers out on the streets more and more. So there's lots to do, but I do believe that bringing that closer working relationship both with businesses and local councils and the districts is so important. And as I say, I don't actually think that's an option. I think it's a place we have to go for the benefit of everybody, and particularly our tourism industry that we spoke about earlier, because of course, as well as agriculture, it's one of our biggest parts of the economy, and that is going to be absolutely hammered this summer. And so we have to maintain that atmosphere of a crime-free, lovely place to come. And it's great that actually the new industry and the stuff that Ivan's doing, it's, we need to keep banging home on the drum that this is clean industry, this is the future. And that all complements itself, because actually, if you think about that, good, clean, green energy works with tourism and agriculture as well. They actually complement each other, and I think that's what we've got going for ourselves in Cumbria. Is that perfect blend, if you like. I should be working for the tourist board.
Ivan, quickly in conclusion, have you got any concluding comments you'd like to make?
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole ton of comments I could make, Mike. I just kind of wanted to. I'm also sort of similar to Peter. I guess I class myself as a plastic politician in that I should have been part of elections in April for the business cluster. So that'll happen again soon, and then we'll see how I fare when I put myself back forward for that. But picking up on Trudy's points, incredibly well made. I would say that partly by NNL, because they do pay my salary, but I think as an asset base in Cumbria, we have a seriously strong asset base from a nuclear point of view, and another wider clean energy. And I think as we've come out of this, we've kind of seen, haven't we, the impact on the environment of changing our ways and a different way of operating, and actually moving forward to have that parallel of a sustainable economy and a cleaner environment. And picked up on Peter's point, I think that is something that Cumbria can really bring to the table. So that's definitely something that we'll be focusing a lot of energy on. Green collar jobs, that green economy, green collar jobs is definitely something for us. And sort of finally, that sense of community is something that's in the DNA of the business cluster. We have a new patron that we've just announced, who was the former High Sheriff of Cumbria, Marcia Reid Fotheringham, and she's all about community. It's important for us, we've not gone for an energy nuclear sort of person, because we wanted to sort of really send that strong message out that this is about business in the community. And I think that is another asset. People moving forward might start thinking about, where do they want to live, what's the quality of life that they want to have? What do they care most about? And I think increasingly that will become important to business and become important to the bottom line.
Trudy, finally, we've both been involved in a lot of discussion about the restructure of local government. Do you think, coming out of this crisis, that's likely to expedite that, because there's huge financial pressure on all councils? And when you've addressed that point, a final message that you'd like to get out there to the people who are viewing this podcast?
I do think it will expedite. Or expedite the need, actually. And Simon Clarke, the minister who's responsible for this, has been very clear. He wants to continue with that focus. I don't think it's actually just about finance. I think it's about demystifying complicated Cumbria, because it's actually quite difficult to understand who does what, which councillor is responsible for that, for which aspect of your life or your work or your learning even. And certainly for investors trying to make sense of Cumbria, it's very, very difficult. So if we can simplify things, if we can work better together, if we can take the politics out of it, which is something I've really enjoyed over these last few weeks. The two highlights for me, if there can be, silver linings around dark clouds, it's not having the travel. So I feel like I've found an extra 2 days in my week. And it's not being bogged down with politics, because we're all in this together and we've all got the same goal. And actually working together as a council for the whole of Cumbria would seem absolute common sense, economically, environmentally, and especially for the social side of things as well. And I think my final message is thank you, Cumbria, thank you, Copeland, for the way, I get quite emotional, the way in which we've responded. It's been really, really heartwarming. It's been uplifting, from the community groups to the emergency services, everybody in between. You've made me a very proud MP.
Thank you very much, Trudy. Peter, thank you for joining me today. Ivan, thank you very much for coming on the broadcast. Trudy, great to have you on the broadcast today, and I'm sure everyone who tunes in, it'll be good to hear from you all. I'll be back next week with more guests and more podcasts. Thank you all very, very much.
Thank you, Mike.
Cheers.